listen, you're thinking it, I'm thinking it, Daddy's Head. That's the best title you could come up with? Yeah, not saying that one again, but in all seriousness, I heard some pretty decent things about this one. It's on Shudder, wanted to check it out, and sad to say, the movie's about as good as the title, which means it's not very good.
You need to say goodbye. He's not going to live.
Goodbye, Daddy.
So Father's Noggin tells the story of this kid and his stepmom after the father in this family passes away very early on. You don't know too much about these people, but you can tell they have a very dysfunctional family relationship. The stepmom who's taking over care of this child really has no motherly traits whatsoever. You can tell she's very uncomfortable, and obviously this is trying to explore that dynamic a bit. You know exactly where I'm going with this. This is a clear elevated horror film where it's talking about what it's like to be a step-parent, that dysfunctional turbulence that comes with the fact that this guy has passed away. And they do this in the light of this monster being introduced that wears the deceased dad's face. There are a couple of scenes in here, maybe 2 or 3 if you're pretty light into horror, that could issue some suspense and maybe some scares to you. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell this story of this stepmother taking over the care of this kid who misses his father dearly, and they're doing this through the vein of this creature who wears the dad's face. And when it started off, I was kind of intrigued. The first 10-15 minutes, I thought this was pretty suspenseful, kind of a slow burn tension builder. Then I kind of realized about halfway through, like a lot of these movies, that it's not actually suspenseful and there's no tension being built. It's just as slow and boring as paint drying, because the way this movie plays out, you're following this cast of characters, mainly the son and the stepmother, who have no chemistry whatsoever. Very mundane and pretty boring characters, honestly. Neither of these characters is memorable. They're just everyday characters grieving. So it's not very enjoyable to watch. You're watching the stepmom, who clearly, as I said, is not a mother. And this movie just continuously plays with the kid grieving, the stepmother trying to counsel this kid or just not connecting at all, calling over a neighbor who was friends with the dad in the past before he passed away, getting counseled over the fact that she's grieving and she's not a mother to this kid. And it just keeps repeating like this over and over and over again, while every 20-30 minutes you're introduced to this monster that is kind of creepy, wearing the dad's face. You never see it for prolonged amounts of time. It never really expands on why it's there, where it came from, any of that type of stuff. So you're left with this slog of a movie where you're spending a lot of time with these characters you don't really know anything about. They're not memorable. They're not acted particularly well. And it just feels like the most derivative, run-of-the-mill elevated horror movie you have ever seen. Now, starting off with what I liked about this movie, because there really wasn't a lot, and I might as well get out of the way now. I thought the beginning of the film, when it's starting to build up that tension and the premise of what could possibly be when it comes to that creature wearing the dad's face, there's suspense and scares in there somewhere. There was 1 or 2 scenes, as I said, that maybe could make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I think they're incredibly light personally, but they're in there somewhere, so some people might find this creepy. So the great potential that this movie could be is probably its strength. When your imagination's wondering what's going to happen, it's setting up the scares, you have not been introduced to what you're actually going to see. Your imagination works a lot better than anything this movie has to show you, so I'll commend it for that. It does do a pretty decent job of building up. Problem, as I said, is this is one of those movies that really builds up to nowhere. It just gets more boring and slow and pointless as it goes. But getting back to where Papa's Dome really fails, it's that it is a character piece of a movie. It's elevated horror. It's exploring that dimension between the stepmother and the child, and you just don't care about any of these characters. They're very boring. They're very depressing characters, grieving. Obviously, there's an emotional tie in there somewhere you're supposed to connect with. It didn't get me on board at all. I just didn't buy into the way these characters were set up, and it was way too important that you do buy into it because it's a character piece. It's very slow burning. You're supposed to care naturally because this is a catastrophic event. Obviously, a very young boy losing his father, how the stepmother falls into this. But I just didn't care because the stepmother just felt like a stay-at-home trophy wife who had no likable traits whatsoever. So you're watching her struggle and grieve and drink herself to sleep every night, and I just thought she was kind of a piece of shit who married into this guy's family. So if they were trying to set that up, I did not feel that connection whatsoever. She was just an annoying character to me. Then you have the kid in this who's clearly missing his dad, and he's constantly going out in the forest looking for this creature who wears his dad's face, trying to connect with him. He thinks his dad is still around, clearly a metaphor for grief and that he'll do anything to get another moment with his dad, connect. They just didn't do anything for me to get me to care about this character besides the fact that he's clearly a child and his father died. So aside from the off-screen thing, the empathy we have as humans, this actual movie on screen did nothing to draw me into the fact and care about his character, besides abusing the fact he's just a kid and I'm supposed to care by default. There's also another character I already mentioned keeps showing up around the house to look after the housewife and look after the kid. He was a friend of the dad before he passed away. They don't really elaborate at all on this character, why he keeps coming over, who he is, what his motives are. Maybe it's genuine courtesy, maybe there's a lust of the housewife. I don't really know. It's just kind of all over the place. He only exists to move this story along, because without him, there's absolutely no point to this film. You're just watching a recycled event in the house over and over again with these two moping. So they need this guy to move the story along because every 5 to 10 minutes he shows up and he has the same conversation again and again about getting over grief and how he misses the dad and how she misses him. And they just have the most basic conversations about loss ever. I didn't think anything was profound in what they're trying to say or explore. Where this movie fails the most is as a horror film, as my gripe with elevated horror usually is. It functions as a metaphor, obviously, with that creature wearing his dad's face. You see the creature a couple of scenes. That's when this movie's at its best because it has nothing else going for it besides scares. The creature in this is used in the most formulaic way ever for a scary film. What happens over and over again? Every 20-30 minutes or so, you'll see this monster. He'll be crawling around. The setup is effective enough. You think you're going to get a scare. The music will ramp up. It'll start to zoom in on something. You'll see a little bit of a glimpse of the creature. Then it'll just instantly cut. The next day, a flashback, whatever they want to do, effectively removing all the suspense, all of the tension. It's honestly a masterclass in how to absolutely eliminate all scares and tension from a movie. I've never seen anything like it. It's some of the least effective scares I've seen all year. So yeah, once again, and I feel like I have to say this way too often, I really don't know who this movie's designed for. Maybe somebody out there gets a lot more out of it than me. They think this is incredibly profound, the way they're exploring step parenthood. But to me, I found this movie to not be scary at all. It basically has no scares. It's completely generic. The creature design's okay. You just don't see enough of it. A slog to get through. The acting is not good at all either. Padres Cabeza is absolute background noise. I wouldn't recommend you watch this one. I would just recommend you check out the trailer. It has all the decent scares in it anyways, but if you have seen it, comment down below, let me know what you thought of it, or what your favorite Shudder original is. As always, if you haven't subscribed, join me down below, but that's all I got in this video. Peace!